stuff, but on the last episode, we were chatting about A New Science of Heaven, a recent book in the past couple of years by Robert Temple, talking about plasma physics, plasmoidal emanations, and how they relate to ufological phenomena. I was listening to an audio of The Cosmic Pulse of Life from 1976 by one
There's an audiobook.
Trevor James Constable. There is, yeah.
Nice. Is it well done?
Yeah, it's excellent. Actually, yeah, we're opening up the year with some really good stuff. Invigorating the ufological
Yeah.
terrain. It's nice to backtrack and find some opinions that, are pretty sound and tie together some interesting theories, cite some interesting things that we'll talk about a little bit tonight.
We got to be careful though,
Why is that?
because if we're not careful, we might end up on a round trip to hell in a flying saucer.
Fair enough.
By Cecil Michael, published by Vantage Press in the 1950s. This is a autobiographical novel about Cecil Michael's encounter during a leisurely afternoon at his auto repair shop. Um, and a UFO comes and takes him to hell and then back again.
Son of a bitch.
Whether hell is, yeah, it makes the trip from California to hell. There's
Shucks.
some beautiful illustrations in here too. Anyway, it's another Vanity Press UFO title, which are kind of becoming my, you know, bread and butter in terms of the personal collection.
I know. I'm building up my own little wish list of some titles that I would like to acquire, but they're books that have been on the radar of other people as well, so they can be a
That's always
little
annoying.
pricey. Yeah.
That's why you want to be a freak who has interests that nobody else could possibly. But then you find out that there's at least a couple hundred other freaks like you, and
That's enough.
like, and then you hate them. You're like, you're like me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I mean, most of these books will get pressed like 300 copies, so
right.
you're
Yeah.
fucked either way.
I would love a copy of the original Visitors from Lanulos by, oh no,
Darren
Woody
Berger.
Derenberger.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would love that. What else is on your radar right now in the UFO book world?
Well, I referenced in The Cosmic Pulse of Life is Etheric Ships by Mead Lane, who started Borderland
Yeah.
Sciences Research Associates.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's kind of like a private press, self-published thing, which can
Yeah.
be a little pricey, but he's really the
What's it called?
godfather. It's Etheric Ships. Um,
Yeah.
he's kind of like the progenitor of I don't know, the interdimensional hypothesis, I guess.
What is it? The Ether Ship Mystery?
Maybe, yeah. It's probably got a lot of these books
Right.
have a couple titles.
This was from BSRA. What is that? The
Borderland Sciences
Bureau.
Research
Oh, it's
Associates.
board. Yeah, right. It's border. Yeah, borderline personalities.
Yeah.
Science Associates. Right. Macer's story was out. Never mind. I have to stop. Macer's story was published in there quite a bit.
Yeah, this Trevor James stuff really rounds back to Giant Rock as well. We
Hmm.
talked. We talked Gray Barker at Giant Rock on a recent episode, going to one of George Van Tassel's legendary UFO conventions at the makeshift landing strip at Giant Rock in Joshua Tree, the Mojave Desert. There's a famous photo, actually, if you look up Giant Rock, and it's like a organic cloud type formation photographed
Yeah.
above Giant Rock at one of the UFO conventions. That's a Trevor James Constable image. What I really like about this book is that, well, there's a few things I really like about it, but one of them is it's very practical in its methods of interacting with and documenting the phenomena. Like there's a lot of photographic techniques, and he basically lays out uh, the parameters for shooting this, what kind of camera, relatively inexpensive 35 millimeter camera to use, and how to do it. And it's pretty cool because he's kind of laying, with some uh, almost like ceremonial magic type preparatory parameters that he lays. And
Mm,
we could get into that and George Van Tassel and uh, the
yeah.
kind of psychic phenomena involved here. But once he starts photographing this stuff, he's talking with using infrared film. Um, he's talking about how it's almost like looking at under a microscope, like looking at pond life under a microscope. That there are so so many of these sky creatures or critters, as he calls them, in the atmosphere, not visible to the naked eye, but visible when you're viewing them under certain parameters using certain tools. Doesn't that conjure, quantum physics stuff as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds so much like the stuff that Temple is describing in his book.
Yeah.
Although I guess, I mean, the naked eye visibility versus not, it's very much kind of in the same wheelhouse. And so you wonder, I mean, I haven't finished the Temple book yet, but I'm like more than half of the way through, a couple, three quarters almost. And I don't think he's mentioned Constable yet. Does it come up?
He does not mention Constable. However,
Yeah.
in Constable's book, 1976, he's talking about these. Oh, I mean, are we gonna? It's complicated. It makes you think about the UFO thing in an interesting way, where there's this whole ecology to it. Where on one side, a lot of the observed phenomena is certainly black projects, actual mechanical craft,
Hmm.
um, for sure. But then there's also this whole question of, are these things that are being witnessed on radar through infrared film, and sometimes, with the naked eye, are they an entity? Is it a representation of a consciousness, or is it some sort of, um, you know, orgone, energy, plasma, vessel? These are the types of things that he's speculating in this book. Um, but yeah, the language that he uses is like plasma pulsation. So, it's
Hmm.
directly related to the Temple book in that
Yeah.
way, for sure.
Yeah. And he kind of falls in my mind into that weird little Reichian ufology school, which I think it might just be him and the other guy, Jerome Temple,
Oh,
who
Mead
has a couple
Lane,
books. Mead Lane, right?
for
Is he?
sure.
And then yeah, that kind of thinking of the UFO thing is almost a natural phenomenon that we haven't quite like grasped yet because it's using a realm of the natural world that we aren't familiar with, which I guess is kind of what the nuts and bolts explanation is too, in a way. But this feels more like it's a weird combination of the interdimensional explanation with the nuts and bolts like aliens explanation. So it's kind of satisfying in that way.
Yeah, there's concepts of plasma physics, exobiology, like a new biology. He also cites, let's see, who wrote Ivan T. Sanderson, who was the biologist who wrote
Yeah,
Uninvited Visitors.
the man.
He was a biologist who turned his eye to the UFO phenomena and wrote Uninvited Visitors. And there's some interesting. Oh, it even the way that like in the second chapter he goes right into Gnosticism, and of course that like strikes a chord with me.
Is
Second or
that the
third,
site?
second or
It's
third
like,
chapter, early in the
yeah, I think
book.
I'm like a bit into the book, and yeah, that is crazy. I love, and I mean, I haven't finished the book. I'm in the middle somewhere, and I don't know if he gets into Philip K. Dick. Does he? Have you gotten to a point where he talks about Philip K. Dick? Because it's like so, well, he's like describing Philip K. Dick's experience.
I know, yeah. No, I thought about Dick stuff a lot too. And it brings that back into the conversation as well, being blasted with the pink,
Right.
the strawberry beam. And it also reminded me of something I talked about a little bit last year, which was Al-Kindi's stellar rays, which is from, I think, the 7th or 8th century AD.
Mm.
But it's kind of like a Neoplatonist work about from the Godfather of the Godfather. Goddamn, I'm gonna regret so many silly things I say tonight. It's like
The Godfather.
yeah. But I think he's like the father of Middle Eastern Muslim philosophy is probably something
Oh,
like that comes up in the Wikipedia page. But yeah, it's kind of a
yeah.
Neoplatonist text about the influence of heavenly bodies emitting these stellar rays that influence uh, things here on Earth in the material realm. And that's a lot what happens in what is described in this Robert Temple book as well, is really that 99%, maybe more than 99% of the observable universe is plasma, which was, it was
Yeah.
conventionally considered. And I think a lot of people still think that, space is void and it's this vacuum of, empty, dead air kind of. But really it's this complex like series of countless networks of plasma, which is a
Mm.
thing in physics that we've only kind of like scientifically rooted out for the last 70 years maybe, although like Temple talks about some foundational stuff that happened before that, some concepts, and even going back to Aristotle and the aurora borealis and
Yeah.
interesting things like that were early conceptions of plasma physics. But yeah, only for about 70 years or so, I would say, has it existed in that terminology, also being called
So,
radiant energy, I believe. Yeah.
radiant gas, ionically charged gases, like yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying because know what it is in a general sense, but it's cool getting this rundown of the history of it's like pretty radical idea. Actually, it's like pretty crazy. Like this very like foundation rocking approach to, understanding the nature of physical reality. And then I guess I haven't gotten there yet, but in Temple's book, he keeps hinting that he's gonna, like this is going to have something to do with like the nature of life, not life, because that starts from the beginning, but the nature of, the soul and like stuff like this, like is going to get into more of his kind of terrain because so far it's been a very interesting like summary of suppressed and
Mm.
like esoteric science. Esoteric in the sense of it's like it's too specific for the general public to talk about. But yeah, and he keeps talking about how it's like this inorganic form of life, which and
Yeah.
he kind of emphasizes it a few times. He's like, let me read that again. He like that he pulled one of those. And it's really, I mean, it is pretty astounding and has a lot to do with almost everything. So yeah, it's kind of cool that this book has entered the picture from
Yeah.
this guy. I know who he is, but for some reason just didn't follow his career. He's just like one of those guys who slipped through the cracks for me.
Yeah. It's really it's really great to kind of like picture that and have that insight, because when you look at the photos of the UFO conventions at Giant Rock, it's truly remarkable. It's incredible to think about that many people gathering in the desert, 2.5 hours, 3 hours outside of LA,
Yeah.
um, to talk about UFOs and to camp and just meet different writers and publishers and contactees and all kinds of strange people just listening to each other talk about alien encounters and weird stuff.
It does sound nice. Maybe like hindsight is giving it a certain look, but that sounds so much nicer than whatever's going on now. Like I'm almost like feeling kind of down on, I mean, I'll never feel down on it really because of, because of such historical things as this, but like the whole drone thing right now is really giving me a bad feeling.
It's meant to. You're in the midst of a psyop.
Well, yeah, right. I know, but I just mean like the way it is playing off the UFO thing is like the worst possible side of it, which is like just like gut panic and like paranoia and uh it's so weird how people are like trying to shoehorn like some potential high strangeness into it. Whereas like I mean my read on it would be that maybe there's some high strangeness involved, if only because of the massive amounts of stress and psychic energy it's generating. So maybe that's like creating like ghost drones or something like that. But I don't think that like people saying like, "Well, look at these orbs and like they're just pretending to be drones." Like, I mean, it's such classic like wishful thinking, or maybe that's the wrong word, but
Oh, I mean, you nailed it with shoehorning because that's how
yeah,
it feels to me as well. And it's not to say that like that whole concept isn't interesting. Like it does call to mind that incredible story Eugenia Macer was tracking in the Poconos area of Pennsylvania,
yeah,
where she apparently took a Polaroid of a cloud that formed into an airplane, like a smoke
right.
cloud materialized in front of her, not in the sky. Like, oh, that
Yeah, I
cloud
was
looks
thinking
like a
about
plane.
that.
So there's room uh, to entertain those more ethereal conceptions of cloaking and perception and what's the word, like transposing our technological concepts onto a hyper object and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But I mean, it's just like it's so much more obvious right now that we're performing these late stage Cold War military games with China and Russia, and it's just like we're ramping up defense. There's a crazy ongoing conflict between Israel and
Yeah,
Palestine and in the Middle East, and it's just like it feels very transparent that it's not even a psyop, that it's just kind of like maybe a red team sort of, hey, let's expose the weaknesses in our defense system so that we can garner trillions of dollars towards building that radar mesh to detect. And you know what? That's not actually the worst thing in the world, because there is a changing landscape of crazy drones and shit. And I don't just mean like a
yeah,
fucking little helicopter man drone. I mean, there's like stuff that could really outflank like some of the best military fighter jets and Air Force fighter jets and stuff. So,
yeah. There's like those balls.
yeah. And all kinds of hypersonics and shit. So, I mean, I've said this before and I'll say it again. When I listen to the UAP hearings, primarily the ones from 2021, I think, before Grush came out, like to me, the language was a lot about this stuff, and
For sure.
maybe they didn't get the attention that they needed. So now this is some kind of like red team hired contractor within or, connected to the military industrial complex that is exposing a lacking defense system for stuff like this, while also, doing kinds of psyopy shit as well. I'm
Yeah,
sure it's multifaceted. But yeah, to try and make this into something that is a part of the phenomena. Just, I don't see any evidence or reason for that. Like, there's nothing ufologics about this. Like, you haven't heard of anything classically related to the phenomena. So it's just, I don't know. There's a lot of freaks who are just attention hungry and trying to say crazy shit on X.com, and that's the world we live in. But that's why this Gray Parker book was incredible to listen to an audio of it this time, because it's 1970, man, like in the desert. And George Van Tassel is incredible. If you haven't looked at pictures of the Integratron, look at them. It's a structure that he channeled the plans from essentially Space Brothers, ethereal beings, and it's an architectural structure in the middle of the desert that he was constructing that would use some sort of like high static energy and gravitational force to reverse the effects of aging. The structure didn't get completed in the way that, you know, he had originally meant it to, like the technology of it. But it's complete as an architectural space that you can still go to.
Visit patreon.com/consensusunreality to listen to this episode, subscribe to our printed journals, and receive regular, exclusive episodes and more.